So it's my pleasure to today introduce Farid Shafiyev, two-time ex-Azerbaijani ambassador, chairman of the Center for Analysis of International Relations, and author of Ethnic Myths and Perceptions as a Hurdle to Conflict Settlement, the Armenian-Azerbaijani Case. Mr. Shafiyev, welcome.
Thank you.
So the first question I kind of want to ask is that the results of the first Nagorno-Karabakh war in the early 90s, they left Armenia occupying the officially Azerbaijani territories of Nagorno-Karabakh, despite officially Azerbaijan having them. What escalated this conflict that many saw as frozen for many years?
Sorry, so what was the reason of the freezing the conflict?
What was the reason for it starting up again?
Recently. Okay, so basically what for 27 years, since exactly 26 years, but since the ceasefire in 1994, Armenia and Azerbaijan were negotiating the peace agreement, and the auspices of the OEC Minsk Group co-chairs, that's the groups created within the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and the institutions which is called Minsk Group, though they never met in Minsk, but still it's the name, official name. And within that Minsk Group, we have 9 countries. And since 1997, we have the Institute of Co-Chairmanship, and it's co-chaired by 3 countries, France, Russia, and United States. The sides produced several documents on the table: package, step-by-step solution, common state solution. But the latest one was the so-called Madrid Principles. They were declared in Madrid, but official name of the basic principles of the resolution of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. They were updated in 2009, and basically both countries accepted this document as a ground for implementation. But unfortunately, Armenia evaded from the implementation of this document. And the Madrid Principles, indeed, it has 6 principles, stipulated step-by-step the solution: return of refugees, the return of Azerbaijani regions outside of Nagorno-Karabakh. And this is important. You mentioned from the beginning, this is internationally recognized territory of Azerbaijan. Why I also mentioned 27 years, because in 1993, United Nations Security Council adopted 4 resolutions, 822, 853, 874, 884, which reconfirmed Azerbaijan's territorial integrity and sovereignty over Nagorno-Karabakh itself, which Armenia wants, and the 7 regions outside. So the Madrid Principles, they stipulated that the 7 regions outside of Nagorno-Karabakh will be returned to Azerbaijan, and then the refugees will be returned back to their home, and we have 1 million refugees, more exactly internal displaced persons, about 800,000 from both sides. There are Armenian refugees from Azerbaijan, Azerbaijani refugees from Armenia, but this is the kind of outside of the Madrid Principles.
Were the refugees, were they caused from the first Nagorno-Karabakh conflict?
Yes. Basically, what happened in 1992-94, Armenia occupied Nagorno-Karabakh and 7 regions and expelled the whole Azerbaijani population. So there was the ethnic cleansing. This is maybe one of the peculiar characteristics of this conflict, because in other conflicts, in Kashmir, in Palestine, even in Georgian and Moldovan case, in Ukrainian case, there is no 100% ethnic cleansing happened. So this is the conflict with complete ethnic cleansing. So no Azerbaijani virtually left in the formerly occupied territories. So we have the principles which stipulates the return of territories to Azerbaijan. They were not implemented, but there's what happened basically the last 2 years with the arrival of the current Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan to Armenia, who would like to posit himself posture as a democrat, as it was the so-called Velvet Revolution. Unfortunately, his democratic vision did not and do not extend to Azerbaijanis. So he declared in August 2019 that Nagorno-Karabakh is Armenia. That is basically differs from the previous statements of previous presidents, Kocharian and Serge Sargsyan, because openly Armenia never admitted that the Karabakh will be part of Armenia.
Yeah.
They have that goal, so-called Miatsum in Armenian language. That was the slogan when the conflict began in February 1988. But they basically abandoned this slogan after the collapse of the Soviet Union because the territorial enlargement of one country at the expense of another was met critically by the international community. Instead of that principle, they put forward principle of self-determination.
Mhm.
But principle of self-determination does not apply in this case because Helsinki Final Act indeed says, if you will look, that self-determination cannot contradict, cannot be achieved by violent means.
Yeah.
So it should be the consent of the central government. So if you read carefully the clause of the Helsinki Final Act. Anyway, so basically what we've seen that the last 18 months, Armenia abandoned Madrid principles. They said we don't have any documents on the resolution on the negotiations table. That was said repeatedly by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia in March, April last year, 2020. Then I said 2019, August, Prime Minister declared Nagorno-Karabakh is Armenia, period. And this year, the Armenian Prime Minister also visited city Shusha, which was predominantly populated by Azerbaijanis in May. They declared that the parliament of so-called local authorities in Nagorno-Karabakh will be moved to Shusha. Then in July, that's important, there was the clashes, military clashes in Tovuz, which is outside of Nagorno-Karabakh, but which is very close to Azerbaijani transportation and energy projects, pipelines. And even though the Armenian side denies that it provoked this conflict, but even the Armenians' closest ally, Russia, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, he acknowledged in August that the July clashes was provoked by Armenia. And then, of course, the also important factor that in August 2020, Armenia also indirectly put forward territorial claim towards Turkey by reviving discussion around so-called Treaty of Serfs. So that treaty was concluded in 1920 after First World War, but never been ratified. And because Turkey rejected this treaty, but the Armenian Prime Minister, Armenian President said that we have to come back and look at this treaty because it's the legal document. So we came to the point that Azerbaijan didn't see any prospect for the peaceful negotiations. And the next provocation, which happened every year, something happened on the line of contact. So the Azerbaijan decided to respond with full-scale military operation. So I know that many people and many experts says that Azerbaijan was preparing to war, and it's Azerbaijan who launched the war. The Azerbaijan never concealed the fact that it's preparing, we have the military doctrine about the liberation of our territories. And so we had clashes in April 2016. So army was always ready to make military operations.
And that's kind of shown by every year you guys have sort of increased military spending, right?
Yes. And also two factors. I believe the Armenians miscalculated degree which they can insult and kind of denigrate Azerbaijanis. The Pashinyan went to Nagorno-Karabakh. He was dancing in the very historical place near Shusha. Also in July, the Armenian forces killed the Azerbaijani general, Polat Hashimov. He was very popular among people. And also important that on July 14th, there was big demonstration in the capital of Azerbaijan, Baku, when people, it was not organized by government, not organized by opposition, but it was the kind of random, but the massive, the masses took part in this demonstration, and they demanded the government of decisive measures against the Armenian armed forces. Basically, the people accused the government of Azerbaijan of inaction. So that was the top, not from top down, but down to top, the movement. So this is what began in 2709 operation. That was the background.
And a lot of people would say that from the start, the Armenian occupation of officially Azerbaijani lands was self-determination, but others would say that it's an Armenian effort to kind of increase their power and influence to what they had many years ago, because like in hundreds of years ago, Armenia was much bigger and much more powerful. Which kind of side are you on?
Well, in being in 21st century and referring as the Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan made in February 2020 in Munich at the conference, the Munich Security Conference, he had a joint interview, not interview, joint conference with the Azerbaijan president. He said that there was great Armenia, and he referred to the Tigran II, the Armenian king, which ruled in the 1st century before Christ. I mean, we are in 21st century. If you're referring to something, what happened 20 centuries ago, I think that's no legal validity, no even logic, because at the same token, the modern Italy can claim Azerbaijan and Armenia too, because at certain point in the history, around 1st century before Christ, both modern days Azerbaijan and Armenia was part of the Roman Empire. So historically, what we know for the last several hundred years ago, this land was ruled by the Turkic, let's say, Azerbaijani rulers. This was part of the Azerbaijan, and there's also cliche about Stalin giving Nagorno-Karabakh to Azerbaijan, which, if we look at the Russian archives, does not confirm this theory, because the Russian archives document says that the Nagorno-Karabakh should be left within Azerbaijan, which means it was before in the hands. So we have international law, and where I'm referring back to the United Nations Security Council resolutions of 1993. They unequivocally reconfirmed the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. So self-determination, as I said, does not apply to the case of Armenian people in Nagorno-Karabakh, because there are in many places Armenian people lives in Georgia, and there is some separatism in Georgia too. Armenians live in the United States, in France. We have international law on the side of Azerbaijan. By the way, Gerard Liberidian, he's the Armenian scholar and politician. I would recommend to read his articles, several he published recently. The Armenian Mirror Spectator newspaper called, where the Gerard Liberidian, he was advisor to the ex-president Levon Ter-Petrosyan. He said that the future, I mean, he emphasized that the Armenian tactics, especially after 1998, that was aimed at the recognition of self-determination of Nagorno-Karabakh, but that strategy failed. And he said that the Armenian leadership, instead of working towards some possible solution, they said, okay, we'll preserve status quo. Nobody recognized Nagorno-Karabakh, but we don't care. So back to your question, self-determination is not working. The international community does not accept, international law does not accept the Armenian rights to self-determination. So we have here international law and the status of territories as occupied. That's it.
And you talked a bit about Armenians outside of Armenia. What
Mhm.
effect do you think the Armenian diaspora is having on like international view of the conflict?
Well, Armenian diaspora is indeed well organized, well entrenched. I mean, they live in many Western countries, specifically France, United States, for many decades, not even century, maybe more than, I mean, in Europe, there were some Armenian settlements, was in Venice, in medieval France. So, and there is also a religious factor. Many well, let's say, right groups, conservative groups in Europe and in the United States, they support Armenians just because they are Christians and who are Muslims, Azerbaijanis. Though the conflict doesn't have religious connotations, because one of the closest ally of Armenia is Iran, and Azerbaijan enjoys good relations with Israel. Basically, that denies the religious background of the conflict, but it was perceived. I mean, we're speaking about perception of people who doesn't know the details of the conflict. Okay, so this is Christian, this is Muslim, so Muslims should be wrong just because we are Muslim. So that's the diaspora. This is their strategy. And unfortunately, maybe in some other cases too, for example, interesting parallels you can find with the Irish British standoff, you know, Good Friday Agreement, the role of Irish diaspora in the United States.
Yeah.
At certain point, it was more radical than the Irish side. At certain point, it was more towards the reconciliation. So here we don't, unfortunately, Armenian diaspora is much more radical. And I believe there are people in Armenia who wanted to achieve peace, but diaspora was quite radical. And again, I'm referring to some scholars of Armenian origin like Arman Grigoryan, and some others who said that the future of Armenia is in the cooperation with Azerbaijan and Turkey. That's the geography. And I don't personally, I don't believe in the ancient hatred concept because this conflict, though relatively old, we can trace back to 1905, but it's still, we won't find the animosity beyond 19th century. So basically, it's the legacy of the Russian Empire. So we don't have time now to go back to the Russian rules, and but briefly, basically, it began under Russian, and Russia still has a great degree influence. I would say negative influence on Armenian irredentist claims. So in this case, unfortunately, diaspora is the radical force rather reconciliatory, you know.
And on the subject of Russia, you talked about how so Russia's traditional ally in the Caucasus is Armenia.
Yeah.
But recently we have seen stronger ties and a stronger relationship between Russia and Azerbaijan. And do you think it's because of this that Russia didn't interfere too much in the conflict, despite many people thinking that they would?
Yeah, I think Azerbaijan leadership managed to develop constructive relationship with Moscow, unlike some other post-Soviet conflicts. The degree of more, let's say, how it's a competing narratives, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, and Russia. In our case, Azerbaijan um, indeed managed to have quite good, solid economic relationship. So that's why probably that explains that the Russian president acknowledged that the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh and surrounding areas are the internationally recognized part of Azerbaijan. So, and if we look at Azerbaijan's economic potential, at Azerbaijan's 75% of regional economy among the South Caucasus three countries comes to Azerbaijan. So, so that's, I think, the more practical approach from Russia.
And there have been many, just on sort of like the general conflict now, there have been many attempts by the West and by other countries to kind of solve this conflict. And notably, I think in 2011, there was the Kazan formula that sort of said that a withdrawal from Azerbaijan's territories by Armenia would then result in an opening of the Armenian border. Why did Armenia not agree with this, and why has it sort of avoided many attempts by the West to implement peace?
Yeah. Kazan formula basically comes from the Madrid principles. There are some modifications to Madrid principles. If Madrid principles just says the return of 7 regions outside of Nagorno-Karabakh, the Kazan formula stipulates more step-by-step approach, 5+2. The reason why Armenia decided not to accept anything, now, for example, a few days ago, Pashinyan published an article trying to blame everything on Azerbaijan. But if we look at the Madrid principles, it stipulates that now, at the first stage, we have return of Azerbaijan territory outside of Nagorno-Karabakh, return of refugees, some confidence building measures. And the most important and most moot question about the status of Nagorno-Karabakh will be decided at later stage. But Armenians wanted to have some guarantees that basically we're speaking about detachment of Nagorno-Karabakh from Azerbaijan as a first step. Guarantees that that will happen, independence of so-called Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. So that's the one reason. They basically denied this step-by-step philosophy. And second, I believe it just Armenia was overconfident. You know, again, I'm referring to some Armenian scholars like Libaridian and Arman Grigoryan, which said that, you know, Armenian intellectual elite, political leadership, they created sort of the mythology, and they believed that the whole world behind them. They said that we can just ignore what's going on around us. There are some events actually that inspired them, like the independence of Kosovo. But what was unique case Kosovo? So didn't, and still, I mean, Kosovo is still kind of, you know, some countries recalled their recognition. So we said, okay, our troops on the Azerbaijan territories, Russia behind us, and, you know, the Western countries, we have strong diaspora, and we just can continue to keep up with the status quo, and in the future we will resolve this issue. And also mythology was like Armenia, modern Armenia. In 1918, when the first republic was created, this was small, but it was kind of gradually enlarging. So we have that with this mythology, this perception that they can enlarge further, even towards Turkey. So this is what was speaking the Serge Sarkisyan, the president. I think it was 2012. He was speaking with the young Armenians and said, okay, my generation resolved the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh, the future generation should resolve the issue of so-called Western Armenia, which is, they call the territory in Turkey, Western Armenia. So I believe that that kind of mythology made Armenians think that they continue endlessly occupation of Azerbaijan territories.
And on the subject of Turkey, Turkey was quite heavily involved in the conflict. Do you think that Turkey was involved in the conflict because they wanted to protect the Azeri people, which are very close ethnically to the Turkish, or was it more about just providing peace to the area?
Well, there are several factors. I think Turkey, from the first day of independence of Azerbaijan, supported Azerbaijan politically, closed the borders in 1993 when the Azerbaijan territories were occupied. But Turkey was not willing to act more decisively. But what happened, I believe, the Armenian provocations, Armenian narratives, Armenian phraseology became more aggressive over time towards Turkey, towards, I mean, I'm referring to the Treaty of Sevres, all this discussion. So made Turkey to think that it should really show the Armenia the limits of their territorial ambition. So they supported Azerbaijan, but I would like again to make emphasize, yes, Turkish support in this war was important, but I would say it was more towards the balancing Russian involvement on the Armenian side.
Yeah. And was
Yes,
Russia?
we used Turkish drones. We used Turkish drones, but we had also Israeli drones, and the number of Israeli drones, I believe, in terms of numbers of drones, more in Azerbaijani army, more Israeli drones than Turkish drones. And also there is the questions of Turkish troop was not on the ground. There was some F-16s, more kind of the as a symbolic presence, you know, to show, okay, if something happened, we will, as it will be the involvement of third country like Russia, it will defend. But Turkey and Russia, indeed, they working towards the solution of their mutual problems. So I think there was kind of agreement between Turkey and Russia that they won't be involved on the ground.
Because there's been historically there's been a lot of competition between Turkey and Russia. I mean, they've fought in similar conflicts like Libya and in Syria. Do you think that in the Caucasus it's kind of an extension of that?
There is different reasons why Turkey doing in Syria and Libya and in the Caucasus. Syria is the primary concerns of the Turkish security, border security. The PKK, the Kurdish question. For Russia involvement in Syria, it's just the attempt of revival of their imperial ambitions. Okay, we have, you know, during the Soviet Union, they were heavily involved in Syria, Iraq, Libya. So this to show and also to irritate the Western force, the powers, United States. Okay, so that because Syria does not concern the Russian security. The same, even more about Libya. With Libya, Turkish interest lies in these maritime borders. The Caucasus is a bit different. Caucasus for Russia is what they perceive as the region of their historical presence, where the border security, North Caucasus, where this post-imperialist still vision that the whole Soviet area, former Soviet area, is should be under their umbrella, which is basically is actually falling apart. We see the Baltic gone. Ukrainian, they have forces in Donbass, Lugansk, but the Ukrainian society is moving, I mean, already moved from Russia. The same we can see now in Moldova, definitely, and Georgia is gone. So here, but Turkish interest in the South Caucasus is more about the historical and the economic linkages. Oil pipelines, gas pipelines. So this is different set of interest on the Russian and the Turkish side. But also, I believe, besides to see this all these spots, Syria, Libya, and South Caucasus, as area of clashes between Turkey and Russia, we can see also as area where some kind of came to consensus, you know, not maybe consensus, but this sort of the modus operandi of cooperation. So in Syria, they agreed on certain principles. In Libya, they coming almost to the same, and the same in the Caucasus. So it might be turned into areas of cooperation because the Russian economy is not good. So I don't think Russia is looking some new conflict, especially with Turkey. We have now a good relationship in terms of military cooperation, nuclear power plant, and etc.
And so just the final question now. It's the big one. Do you think that the only hope for peace in the area is a withdrawal of the Armenian claim to Nagorno-Karabakh, or do you think there can be a compromise?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we don't speak about some uh, unrealistic targets. Look at the Europe. European experience in 20th century was wars, territorial claims,
Mm.
First World War, Second World War, and the agreement, let's say, the principal agreement was to preserve territorial integrity of states in Europe and to develop the rights for minorities. So we can see Germans in France, Austrians in Italy, and blah, blah, all these areas all mixed. So you cannot have 100% clean areas, like clean in terms of all the ethnic groups belongs, for example, to certain country. All Italians live in Italy and all Austrians live in Austria. So you can have all this. The same in the Caucasus, even more complex history. So the only solution if free countries and all countries around would recognize their territorial integrity. So that's the essential for Armenia to recognize Azerbaijan's territorial integrity and to restore good working relationship with Turkey and Azerbaijan. That's the future of Armenia. But unfortunately, we don't see that. Armenian society is full of revanchism. Maybe, yes, the conflict is still fresh, wounds fresh. Even in Azerbaijan, there is still people lost close ones. So, but I think that's the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Shafiev, thank you very much for this fascinating insight into a highly important and current issue. I hope that those reading our future article or watching this video have understood a bit more about this conflict and will be a bit more equipped to talk about it in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. And if you have any questions, you can write me anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Bye.